travelled out another noisy mile or so, that the Traveling Salesman spoke again, and this time it was just a little bit surreptitiously. "What you crying for?" he asked with incredible gentleness. "I don't know, I'm sure," confessed the Youngish Girl snuffingly. "I guess I must be tired." "H'm," said the Traveling Salesman. After a moment or two he heard the sharp little click of a watch. "Oh, dear me!" fretted the Youngish Girl's somewhat smothered voice. "I didn't realize we were almost 2 hours late. Why, it will be dark, won't it, when we get into Boston?" "Yes, sure it will be dark," said the Traveling Salesman. After another moment the Youngish Girl raised her forehead just the merest trifle from the back of the Traveling Salesman's seat, so that her voice sounded distinctly more definite and cheerful. "I've never been to Boston before," she drawled a little casually. "What?" exclaimed the Traveling Salesman. "Been all around the world and never been to Boston? Oh, I see," he added hurriedly. "You're afraid your friends won't meet you." Out of the Youngish Girl's erstwhile disconsolate mouth a most surprising laugh issued. "No, I'm afraid they will meet me," she said dryly. Just as a soldier's foot turns from his heel alone, so the Traveling Salesman's whole face seemed to swing out suddenly from his chin, till his surprised eyes stared direct into the Girl's surprised eyes. "My heavens!" he said. "You don't mean that you've been writing an indiscreet letter?" "Yes, I'm afraid that I have," said the Youngish Girl quite blandly. She sat up very straight now, narrowed her eyes just a trifle stubbornly toward the Traveling Salesman's very visible astonishment. "And what's more," she continued, clicking at her watch case again, "and what's more, I'm on my way now to meet the consequences of said indiscreet letter." "Alone?" gasped the Traveling Salesman. The twinkle in the Youngish Girl's eyes brightened perceptibly, but the firmness did not falter from her mouth. "Are people apt to go in crowds to meet consequences?" she asked perfectly pleasantly. "Oh, come now," said the Traveling Salesman's most persuasive voice. "You don't want to go and get mixed up in any sensational nonsense and have your picture stuck in the Sunday paper, do you?" The Youngish Girl's manner stiffened a little. "Do I look like a person who gets mixed up in sensational nonsense?" she demanded rather sternly. "No," acknowledged the Traveling Salesman conscientiously. "No, but then there's never any telling what you calm, quiet looking, still waters sort of people will go ahead and do, once you get started." Anxiously he took out his watch and then began hurriedly to pack his samples back into his case. "It's only 25 minutes more," he argued earnestly. "Oh, I say now, don't you go off and do anything foolish. My wife will be down at the station to meet me. You'd like my wife. You'd like her fine. Oh, I say now, you come home with us for Sunday and think things over a bit." As delightedly as when the Traveling Salesman had asked her how she fixed her hair, the Youngish Girl's hectic nervousness broke into genuine laughter. "Yes," she teased, "I can see just how pleased your wife would be to have you bring home a perfectly strange lady for Sunday." "My wife is only a kid," said the Traveling Salesman gravely, "but she likes what I like, all right, and she'd give you the shrewdest, eagerest little helping hand that you ever got in your life, if you'd only give her a chance to help you out with whatever your trouble is." "But I haven't any trouble," persisted the Youngish Girl with brisk cheerfulness. "Why, I haven't any trouble at all. Why, I don't know but what I'd just as soon tell you all about it. Maybe I really ought to tell somebody about it. Maybe anyway, it's a good deal easier to tell a stranger than a friend. Maybe it would really do me good to hear how it sounds out loud. You see, I've never done anything but whisper it just to myself before. Do you remember the wreck on the Canadian Pacific Road last year? Do you? Well, I was in it." "Gee!" said the Traveling Salesman. "'Twas up on just the edge of Canada, wasn't it? And 3 of the passenger coaches went off the track? And the sleeper went clear over the bridge and fell into an awful gully? And caught fire besides?" "Yes," said the Youngish Girl, "I was in the sleeper." Even without seeming to look at her at all, the Traveling Salesman could see quite distinctly that the Youngish Girl's knees were fairly knocking together and that the flesh around her mouth was suddenly gray and drawn like an old person's. but the little persistent desire to laugh off everything still flickered about the corners of her lips. "Yes," she said, "I was in the sleeper, and the two people right in front of me were killed, and it took almost 3 hours, I think, before they got any of us out. And while I was lying there in the darkness and mess and everything, I cried and cried and cried. It wasn't nice of me, I know, nor brave, nor anything, but I couldn't seem to help it, underneath all that pile of broken seats and racks and beams and things. And pretty soon a man's voice, just a voice, no face or anything, you know, but just a voice from somewhere quite near me, spoke right out and said, 'What in creation are you crying so about? Are you awfully hurt?' And I said, though I didn't mean to say it at all, but it came right out, 'No, I don't think I'm hurt, but I don't like having all these seats and windows piled on top of me.' And I began crying all over again. 'But no one else is crying,' reproached the voice. 'And there's a perfectly good reason why not,' I said. 'They're all dead.' 'Oh!' said the voice, and then I began to cry harder than ever, and principally this time, I think, I cried because the horrid old red plush cushions smelt so stale and dusty, jammed against my nose. And then after a long time the voice spoke again, and it said, 'If I'll sing you a little song, will you stop crying?' And I said, 'No, I don't think I could.' And after a long time the voice spoke again, and it said, 'Well, if I tell you a story, will you stop crying?' And I considered it a long time, and finally I said, 'Well, if you'll tell me a perfectly true story, a story that's never been told to anyone before, I'll try and stop.' So the voice gave a funny little laugh, almost like a woman's hysterics, and I stopped crying right off short, and the voice said, just a little bit mockingly, 'But the only perfectly true story that I know, the only story that's never been told to anybody before, is the story of my life.' 'Very well, then,' I said, 'tell me that.' Of course I was planning to live to be very old and learn a little about a great many things, but as long as apparently I'm not going to live to even reach my 29th birthday to morrow, you don't know how unutterably it would comfort me to think that at least I knew everything about some one thing. And then the voice choked again just a little bit and said, 'Well, here goes, then. Once upon a time, but first can you move your right hand? Turn it just a little bit more this way. There. Cuddle it down. Now you see I've made a little home for it in mine. Ouch, don't press down too hard. I think my wrist is broken. All ready, then? You won't cry another cry. Promise. All right, then. Here goes. Once upon a time.' 'Never mind about the story,' said the Youngish Girl tersely. 'It began about the first thing in all his life that he remembered seeing, something funny about a grandmother's brown wig hung over the edge of a white piazza railing, and he told me his name and address and all about his people and all about his business and what banks his money was in, and something about some land down in the Panhandle, and all the bad things that he'd ever done in his life, and all the good things that he wished there'd been more of. And all the things that no one would dream of telling you if he ever expected to see daylight again. Things so intimate, things so. But it wasn't, of course, about his story that I wanted to tell you. It was about the home, as he called it, that his broken hand made for my frightened one. I don't know how to express it. I can't exactly think, even, of any words to explain it. Why, I've been all over the world, I tell you, and fairly loafed and lolled in every conceivable sort of ease and luxury. But the soul of me, the wild, restless, breathless, discontented soul of me, never sat down before in all its life, I say, until my frightened hand cuddled into his broken one. I tell you, I don't pretend to explain it. I don't pretend to account for it. All I know is that smothering there under all that horrible wreckage and everything, the instant my hand went home to his, the most absolute sense of serenity and contentment went over me. Did you ever see your young white horses straying through a white birch wood in the springtime? Well, it felt the way that looks. Did you ever hear an alto voice singing in the candlelight? Well, it felt the way that sounds. The last vision you would like to glut your eyes on before blindness smote you. The last sound you would like to glut your ears on before deafness dulled you. The last touch before intangibility. Something final, complete, supreme, ineffably satisfying. And then people came along and rescued us, and I was sick in the hospital for several weeks. And then after that I went to Persia. I know it sounds silly, but it seemed